What if the rise and fall of civilizations was not random, but followed a predictable pattern? Across centuries and continents, historians, economists, and sociologists have identified the same recurring anatomy of societal life cycles. In this video, we explore the theoretical frameworks that explain how societies are born, grow, peak, and decline. And we ask a critical 21st century question: will technology save us or speed up the fall? Throughout history, civilizations have been studied like living organisms. They are born, they grow, they reach maturity, and they fade away into senescence. This is the organic metaphor of societal life cycle history. But it is more than a poetic idea. Economist Mancur Olson gave it structural teeth with his theory of institutional sclerosis, the observation that aging societies naturally accumulate structural rigidities. Entrenched elites build walls around their privileges. Bureaucracies multiply and choke innovation. And over time, the system loses the very flexibility it needs to survive new challenges. To understand how societies rise and fall, we can break the analysis into four distinct lenses. First, the mind, the psychological and cultural glue that binds a population together. Second, the body, the material structures, economics, and demographics that keep the system running. Third, the clock, the measurable quantitative lifespan of great powers. And fourth, the wild card, how modern technology accelerates or fundamentally alters these historical cycles. Each lens reveals a different dimension of the same inevitable process. Three great thinkers map the cultural soul of civilizations. Ibn Khaldun, writing in the 14th century, identified asabiya, social solidarity, as the engine of a rising state. Forged in hardship and cooperation, it erodes within 3 to 4 generations, as wealth and comfort replace it with bureaucracy and force. Oswald Spengler saw societies transition from a living, creative culture phase into a cold, mechanical civilization, marked by world cities, intellectual detachment, and power politics. And Arnold Toynbee argued that societies are born through creative minorities who solve great challenges, but die when those elites degenerate into dominant minorities who only know how to repress. For Toynbee, decline is not destiny. It is a choice. It is, in his word, cultural suicide. Historian Joseph Tainter offers one of the most powerful explanations for why societies collapse, not through invasion or disaster, but through the sheer weight of their own solutions. Every problem a society faces, it solves by adding complexity. More bureaucracy, more infrastructure, more military. Early on, these investments yield enormous returns. But over time, the curve flattens. Eventually, a society enters what we might call the senescent zone, where it must tax its population ever more heavily just to maintain what already exists. No energy is left for growth. The system becomes brittle, and when a shock arrives, no matter how small, it can trigger rapid, total collapse. Political scientist Peter Turchin takes a demographic X-ray of societal decline. He identifies 3 key actors: the state, the elites, and the general population, and watches what happens when they fall out of balance. The warning signs are consistent. Popular immiseration sets in, the living standards of citizens decline. The state enters fiscal crisis, chronically unable to fund its own operations. But the most dangerous dynamic is what Turchin calls elite overproduction. Society generates far more ambitious, privileged, status-seeking elites than there are positions to absorb them. The result? The elite class fractures into warring factions, each mobilizing disgruntled citizens against themselves and other factions. A zero-sum political war that hollows out the center. How long does a great power last? Remarkably, the answer has been consistent across history. Military historian Sir John Glubb analyzed empires across centuries and found a strikingly uniform average lifespan of 250 years, roughly 10 human generations. Every empire tends to pass through the same 6 stages: pioneers, conquest, commerce, affluence, intellect, and finally, decadence. But here is a fascinating mathematical paradox, noted by researcher Samuel Arbesman. The math of collapse follows a memoryless distribution. A 500-year-old empire is statistically just as likely to fall next year as a 50-year-old one. The 250-year average isn't a countdown clock. It's a reflection of how long an increasingly complex system, suffering diminishing social cohesion, can statistically avoid a fatal external shock. Societies don't simply die of old age. What kills them is a specific, observable convergence. As a society ages, its structural complexity and costs rise continuously. At the same time, social cohesion steadily erodes. These two lines intersect, and in the zone where maximum structural bloat meets minimum social cohesion, a society has no resilience left. It has exhausted its internal buffers. At this point of maximum vulnerability, an external shock, a pandemic, a toxic authoritarian leader, a financial crisis, a military defeat can trigger total collapse. The 250-year mark is simply the statistical horizon of how long this dangerous convergence can be avoided. Modern technology introduces a force that none of the classical theorists could fully anticipate. Sociologist Hartmut Rosa calls it social acceleration. Technology speeds up production, communication, and social change so intensely that it begins to generate something paradoxical. Rosa calls it the frenetic standstill. Society appears to be in constant, furious motion on the surface. New trends, new crises, new information flooding in every second. But underneath, the structural foundations remain frozen. The system runs faster and faster, spending more and more resources and energy, not to grow, but simply to maintain what already exists. In Tainter's terms, technology can dramatically accelerate the arrival of the senescent zone. Technology presents civilization with a fork in the road, and the direction taken is not predetermined. On one path, technology as salvation. Breakthroughs in AI, automation, or energy could radically lower the cost of problem solving, effectively resetting Tainter's marginal return curve. A society that masters these tools could outpace demographic decline, reduce structural bloat, and renew its growth trajectory, cheating the life cycle entirely. On the other path, technology as solvent. Digital platforms can dissolve the social cohesion that holds societies together by sealing populations into algorithmically curated echo chambers that amplify anger and deepen division. This path accelerates elite fragmentation and popular immiseration, compressing the timeline to collapse. So what is the takeaway? A society's decline is not a biological death sentence written at birth. It is the measurable accumulation of structural vulnerability and the steady evaporation of social cohesion. The frameworks we've explored, from Ibn Khaldun to Tainter to Turchin, give us the diagnostic tools to understand where our society sits on the curve. The challenge for every institution, every leader, every generation is this: to recognize the warning signs early enough and to actively deploy innovation to reset the curve before maximum vulnerability is reached. History's lesson is not fatalism. It is a call to act before the lightning strikes.